Okay, so in our last video, we talked about the different platforms that are available and what each of them do and what you need to consider when you're thinking about investing in the management of those platforms. Now that you've got that down pat, you need to consider social media advertising. It's a bit of a curly one sometimes because people tend to think, well, social media is free, isn't it? Why am I paying to be on there? I think these days most people have gotten their head around the fact that you need to spend some money on these platforms to get an outcome. Let's face it, they are businesses themselves, they need to make money somehow, and how they do that is through advertising. What this means is, where the platform is free, and it is free for the users become the product. Therefore, the company, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever it might be, sells access to those people, and that access is sold to you, the advertiser, who wants to get access to those people. In return, you pay for it. Now, there begins to be a bit of confusion often between what is content and what is an advert. I have worked with a number of clients that will use the term advert or ad when they're in fact referring to content. When it comes to social media, the two are distinctly different, though they can intertwine. For example, in the case of a promoted post, it's actually a post, or it's a video or a link or whatever it might be, but you're paying to have that seen by more people. So it kind of turns a bit of content into an advert. Bit of a curly one, I know, to wrap your head around, but the fundamentals are almost all of your ads are ads in their own right. They live over here in the ad bucket, and all of your content lives in the content bucket. The two behave differently mechanically, and of course you pay very differently for them. A couple of things you need to consider when you're engaging in advertising and when you want to be budgeting for your social media advertising. You need to be aware there's a number of different types of advert available. You need to be aware that the platforms themselves handle the adverts very differently. And you also need to be aware of the different methods of pricing or the different cost models that are available for each of them. It makes a dramatic difference. And you do get what you pay for, provided that it's structured properly. To begin with, the different types of ads that are available. Well, I mentioned a moment ago promoted posts. That's probably the most common one. That's quite simply where you have a post, maybe on Facebook as an example, and you say to Facebook, hey Facebook, can you take this post and show it to 100,000 other people for me, and I'm going to pay you $200 for that privilege. That's a promoted post. There's only so much you can do with promoted posts though, because it's only buying more coverage on your existing posts. It doesn't do anything fancier than that. A lot of the other ad types though do some very fancy things that really you need to understand quite thoroughly, because there's a lot of value to be unlocked in those. Despite what you might think, they're not just trying to rob more money from you. The other obvious one when it comes to types of adverts is traffic or website traffic adverts. In this particular case, you will have seen these before, a little ad that pops up that says, go to our website and read our blog, or click here for this offer, or whatever it might be. Essentially, those ads are very simple. It's an image or a video or something like that where you're enticing people to go to a website. You pay a fixed amount per visitor and you send them off to the website. Fairly simplistic, but at least it gets people onto your website if that's what your main goal is. Generally speaking though, it can be very wise to have something smarter behind that so that when people land on your website, they actually do something or they get something of value. Video ads have become very prevalent and they can be used in many different ways, but getting people to view your video for one reason or another can be very powerful. It doesn't come at a particularly high cost, which is great, and it can get your content spread around. It's a little bit like a promoted post, but it works a little bit differently because of the way that videos are viewed on the social networks. You can do things like follower growth. You want more fans on your Facebook page? Don't worry, you can pay for that. You can do things like lead generation forms. You build a form within Facebook or Instagram, and when a person clicks on it for the offer that you're giving them, the form pops up, Facebook grabs their information, shoots it off to you, you do whatever you want to do with it, and that's a lead. You've just paid for that. You can do app installs. If you have an app, say an Apple app or an Android app, you can send people off to the respective store and get them to install your app, or download the app, depending on how you have it configured. You pay per download in that case. Same thing with sign-ups. You can get people to sign up to your web application, and again, you pay per sign-up. There's so many different combinations of advert styles these days, they almost start to overlap. But what you need to understand is there's almost always a combination that is best for your need, and it's not always one of the obvious ones, which is the traffic or the promoted post stuff. You need to be much smarter about the way you use those derivations to get a really positive outcome at an excellent ROI, because that's really what you're looking for. Important thing to note here. Whilst there are so many different types of advert, you, as the business, don't necessarily need to know all of them. What you need to know is the general principle around the fact that there are so many different ones. Then when you're having a conversation with your agency, you can talk about those things and say, guys, I know I can do something like this, this, and this. What are my ad types currently that we can use to do that to get the best ROI? Be aware of those differences. Something that a lot of people don't really consider too much when they're launching into social advertising is that all the platforms have advert opportunities. They have advertising platforms within them. Facebook has its own ad platform. Twitter has its own ad platform. LinkedIn does. YouTube does. Pinterest does. Houzz does. All these ad platforms allow you to do advertising on those mediums. Now, the types of adverts that they have will be different, or they will work differently. Promoted posts is probably the most common one, and you'll see that pretty much anywhere, as with the web traffic stuff, but capturing leads, getting video views, that kind of stuff, they work differently on each of the platforms. But be aware that you don't just have to stick with one. Secondly, be aware that they are different in the way that they work, and you'll get different ROIs from each. Another nice little thing to consider is, or to remember at least, is some of these are grouped together. So for example, if you're trying to do Instagram advertising, that's actually through Facebook. Facebook's ad platform looks after Instagram. So if you're doing Instagram advertising, you're probably going to do Facebook advertising at the same time because they're on the same platform. LinkedIn has its own ad manager. It's been changing a lot, and lately it has experienced some challenges, but it's in its own little environment. As with Pinterest, it has its own ad platform. So does Twitter, it's got its own ad platform as well. But an example, YouTube. YouTube's ad platform is actually Google AdWords. So you're logging into Google AdWords to get to YouTube ads. None of this really creates a particular limitation in what you can do. Just be aware that it might not be quite where you're looking for it. And when you're talking to people and they say we go to Facebook Ad Manager for X, say for Instagram adverts, don't be too confused. They're not broken. They are actually going to the right place to get that job done. One of the big things that people often get confused about is the sheer pricing of social media adverts. Now, given that you're going to be outsourcing your social media, it doesn't matter too much that you don't know all the finite details, but when your agency's talking to you about we're going to do this or we're going to do that, or perhaps you're getting your monthly report that says we've done this, this, and this, you need to know, or at least have some idea, what on earth they're talking about. Adverts on social are charged any number of different ways. The most common one is per impression. Per impression means it's a price that you pay per 1,000 people that see your content. Bear in mind here, it is 1,000, not one. So you're paying per 1,000 people that see your content. The kind of numbers that you want to be thinking about here in terms of the dollar figures you might be paying, you could be paying as little as $1 per 1,000 impressions, or you could be paying as much as $100, maybe even $200 per 1,000 impressions, depending on who you're going for. It can get quite expensive, but it is the most common method, and most of the platforms use that same methodology with at least some of their ad types. Another obvious one, and you will have heard of this if you've ever used Google AdWords, the per click. If you're doing website generation traffic, something like this here, or you're sending people off to your blog, for example, you will pay per click. This means when someone clicks on your ad, you're charged X dollars. Now, the kind of numbers you need to be thinking about here, you could be charged as little as 50 cents or as much as up to $20 or $30 per click. It is not uncommon on the social networks to be paying somewhere between $2 and $7 or $8 per click as your baseline. This is not a cheap way to do it. Per follower, another method, if you're looking to do growth, to grow your Facebook or your LinkedIn following, or maybe your Instagram following, you will pay per follower. That simply means every time someone clicks like on your Facebook page, bing, you're charged. That could be as little as 50 cents, it could be as much as $5 or $10. Again, it depends on your target audience. You've got per view. You can pay per view when you're doing video adverts or video content. And the view could be as little as 2 cents, or it could be as much as $1 or $2. Again, it depends on the content. Per install, for example. So if you're sending people off to download your application, you might be paying per install. Again, that can get quite expensive. You could be doing things like per lead as well. So if you're doing lead forms, again, that can be as little as a few cents or as much as $10 or $15 per lead. All of these different mechanisms will ultimately work into an overall ad strategy. So it won't likely be the case when you're working with your agency that they will only charge per impression or they'll only do per click. It'll be a combination of these things to get the best outcome from your budget. What you need to understand is that there will be different variants. So if you start delving into the different where the budget has been spent in a report that you get, be aware you are calculating based on different metrics almost every single time. And be aware that it might look weird on occasion because stuff always changes, or they may even introduce a new metric that you hadn't seen before. Next thing you know, what on earth is this thing I'm paying for? These do change fairly frequently. So get your head around the fact that there's different types, have a little bit of an idea of what they are, and then when you're discussing your ad strategy with your agency, you'll know what they're talking about. So now you've got an idea of where your advertising budget's going to go. As always, if you have questions, please feel free to email us directly or leave questions in the comments field. We endeavour to get back to you as soon as we possibly can with as much detail as we can. There is no stupid questions. Please ask anything that you like. The next video in the series is going to be about social media strategy, what's included, what it means, and then what the kind of pricing can be for that. Thank you again for watching, and we look forward to speaking to you next time.